Welcome everyone to the March 26th, 2026 meeting of the Penfield Planning Board. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Michelle, please call the roll.
Kanauer.
Kanauer here.
Aken.
Aken here.
Daly.
Daly here.
McCooey.
McCooey here.
Tydings.
Tydings here.
Kruger.
Kruger's here.
Prinzing.
Prinzing here.
Ferrigno here.
Thank you. And I assume everybody had a chance to look at the minutes. Thank you, Michelle. Nice job.
Thank
it
you.
was a longer one. So if there are no changes, corrections, questions, anyone move to approve?
Tydings, make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
Kanauer.
Kanauer, aye.
Aken.
Aken, aye.
Daly.
Daly, aye.
McCooey.
McCooey, aye.
Tydings.
Tydings, aye.
Okay, tonight is a work session. We have 5 tabled applications on the agenda. And as you know, there's one new business, a revised resolution based on some work we did at the last meeting. So with that, Matt, take it away.
So the first tabled application, 1320 Harris Road, the DeRoller Subdivision. We have no news from the applicant or their engineers. Still waiting on clarification from the New York State DEC on their wetland delineation. And so at this time, the board needs to take, doesn't need to take any action. They can continue tabling.
Okay.
All right, moving into the next one, 1384 Empire Boulevard, the Verizon antenna. We have prepared the parts 2 and 3 of the EAF pursuant to seeker. We've also prepared a waterfront consistency memo and an approval resolution with conditions for the approval of the conditional use permit. I don't know if the board members had any questions for any of those items that we prepared.
I had just a little bit of cleanup. They all look good to me overall. On the Part 2 EAF, there was we checked the box for impact on human health, which was number 16. The proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. And I don't know why we checked yes there, and I would just propose we check no, given the.
Based
I
on,
mean, I read the Part 3 as well.
So based on, so based on their responses in Part 1, where they note that there are emissions during construction, and that we say that yes, there may be an impact, but all of the impacts are small or no impact may occur. So we are acknowledging that there are emissions that could be detrimental to human health during construction because, you know, there are emissions during that. But when we clarify in that Part 2 that the no or small impact may occur, that's where we're clarifying that even though there are a chance of those impacts to health, they're small or insignificant. So.
Got it. Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification. And overall, I'm fine with that approach. It seems extremely conservative, I guess, is my reaction. You know, with cell phone towers, I mean, you hear a lot of issues with RF, and my understanding of the law, and we can leave it to council to tell us, is like, we can't consider that. And I mean, I don't want to suggest that, you know, the board has any concerns about RF or evaluated that whatsoever.
Yeah, no. And yeah, in as you mentioned, the Part 3, we clarify that the reasoning for the health effects that we are considering are those ones that are really only related to those emissions. I'm just going to double check for 16. Yeah.
Right, it talks about like historical contamination at the site.
Right, and that there was the remediation that occurred there. But yeah, ultimately, the findings of the board, or the findings through the seeker review, is that the proposed development will not have an impact on human health, so.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that, leaving it as is, as long as it sounds like we're clear on the record on what we were talking about.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I have one other item on cleanup. The draft resolution overall looks good to me. The one thing that we don't reference that, to me, was at least how I approached the application, and I think how the applicant approached the application, was the specific criteria for a conditional use permit for wireless communications facility, which we didn't make specific findings there with respect to that section of the code. And I would just, I mean, to me, I think it's as simple as saying, in addition to the basic findings under, what is it, like 13.3, we're also found it consistent with 13.11.
Okay. Yeah, we can revise the approval resolution, let's see, under yeah, I suppose I would go underneath item 20 on page 3, where the board bases its decision to approve its determination of environmental non-significance of the following findings relating to Chapter 250, related to that for the conditional use. We would add in that specific reference to the article related to citing telecommunications.
Okay. Yeah, I think that change makes sense. And then, otherwise, no further comments. I think they're ready to roll with that change.
Sure.
Okay. Anyone else? So I think that's 3 items.
3 items.
Okay.
Sorry. Do you want-
No, go ahead.
Just in summary, the first one would be adoption of parts 2 and 3 of the EAF. Item number 2 would be authorize the chair to sign the waterfront consistency memo. And then the third being approving with conditions the approval for a conditional use permit with the recommended
With the
changes.
recommendations?
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
I'll make that motion as Matt just recited it.
thank you.
They all have to be separate actions.
Oh, they do? Okay, well.
My understanding is that we would do.
Gee, I thought Pete called me out on that
That's
the other
true.
day.
Yeah,
Let's-
actually, yeah, now referring back to that meeting, I think that we can, no, I'm going to say that because that was for, I'm fairly certain, at least in the past, we've always taken a separate vote for
Yeah, let's
the
do that.
EAF.
We don't want to,
I think you would separate seeker
yeah,
from.
we don't want to
Yeah,
muck it up.
substantive decision.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're
So-
voting on the motion is for the EAF, parts 2 and 3.
I'll second.
Kanauer,
Kanauer, aye.
Aken,
Aken, aye.
Daly,
Daly, aye.
McCooey,
McCooey, aye.
Tydings.
Tydings, aye.
Okay, and then the second on the draft, on the approval resolution.
Yeah.
And it's both
Waterfront
the waterfront consistency as well as the,
Yes, those we'll do together.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll move to approve the waterfront consistency determination as well as the approval for a conditional use permit with that one change I noted on the record.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Kanauer,
Kanauer, aye.
Aken,
Aken, aye.
Daly,
Daly, aye.
McCooey,
McCooey, aye.
Tydings.
Tydings, aye.
All right, so that takes care of 1384. Moving on to our third tabled application, 1315 Sweets Corners Road, the Wickham Farms Pavilion. Also for the application, we prepared parts 2 and 3 EAF pursuant to seeker, and then we also drafted an approval resolution with conditions for the application for preliminary, final, and site plan approval. The tabling resolution from the last application, or from the public hearing, we were looking at some information, some guidance from the New York State DEC regarding whether or not, or what the town should consider when recommending a developer get or request a JD. In this case, there weren't, informational wetlands or any of the previously mapped wetlands or any of the national wetland inventory within 100 feet of the project. The town took the most conservative look, or we looked at what the DEC recommended we look at, so all of those wetlands, but also USGS streams, drainage ways, ponds, other water bodies, soil mapping, poorly drained soils, or wetter drainage classes, or using aerial imagery to identify undeveloped areas with natural vegetation, and found that there were no areas within 100 feet of the proposed site or the pavilion that would meet that classification of a wet area. So given that finding that there's no wet areas in the project area, we aren't recommending that the applicant get that or pursue that JD request. And with that, that was really the only outstanding item. I mean, I know that we also received public comments regarding the use of the pavilion for performance space, and that we looked at, originally we had discussed at the last planning board meeting having that be a condition, but ultimately the town already has a process for that. If the applicant wanted the pavilion to be used as a performance space, then they would have to come in for a conditional use permit within the mixed use district. Performance venues are a permitted use in the mixed use district, but they would have to come in for that specific conditional use permit. They're not asking for that at this time. Our understanding is that the pavilion is really only going to be used as a picnic space or just a shelter for the continuing business of the Wickham Farms. But essentially, there is a process already with the town if they wanted to use that, but they're not asking for that at this time. And then as far as the maintenance of vehicles in the pavilion, the applicant indicated that it's really just for storage of vehicles. We had discussed, having a condition in the approval resolution where they would be we would prohibit the maintenance of vehicles in the pavilion. Speaking with town staff, the pavilion is designed for the runoff of the any runoff from the pavilion to go into the stormwater management facility. So that's really how it would be designed. So the initial concern of runoff going into areas where it shouldn't, or going into the wetland areas, it really is designed to go into the stormwater management facility. And then also there were concerns from staff of adding in a condition about the maintenance of farm operation vehicles in the approval resolution, given that the board has limited jurisdiction to limit farm operations to be given the preemption of ag and markets on that, on those concerns and those protections on farm operations. So given those considerations from the public comments that we got at the public hearing, town staff determined that we likely shouldn't add those conditions into the final approval resolution. And so that's how we came to the draft that we prepared for you tonight. So I don't know if we have any questions based on that discussion or.
Thanks, Matt. I just
Yeah.
wanted to note the other public comments we heard were around noise. And
Yes.
I know in the resolution, you did evaluate the proximity of the next residential space to where this facility will be. But was there any further discussion in the review meeting or otherwise, or thoughts on that?
No, there was, we looked at the existing buffering, so there's not any, they're not proposing any additional buffering, right? There is existing buffering on the nearest property line directly to the east, or sorry, to the west, and then to the south, there is the berm and also vegetation along there. But again, the distance from that pavilion to those property lines seems sufficient for that type of buffering. And then, yeah, consideration that the bounce pads or the use of that space was already, for the business or for the operation of it, and it's not fundamentally changing by putting the pavilion there. And so that's where we came to the conclusion that the buffering from just in the space, but also the vegetative and the topography, the berm that they have there, we feel is sufficient buffering for any nominal noise. I mean, ultimately, our understanding that there's no noise being created just from the pavilion itself, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty substantial berm. You can see it
Yeah.
even from Sweet's Corners, looking across there, and that's got to be, I don't know, 1,500 feet back. So,
Thank you.
okay, so any other discussion on the approval resolution? Nope. Okay. Motion to approve?
So first, can we have a motion for the adoption of parts 2 and 3 of the
Oh, I'm
EAF?
sorry, I
Yeah.
missed that. Okay.
I move to approve parts 2 and 3 of the EAF.
I'll second.
Kanauer,
Kanauer, aye.
Aken,
Aken, aye.
Daly,
Daly, aye.
McCooey,
McCooey, aye.
Tydings.
Tydings, aye.
Okay, and then the resolution, I'll move to approve.
I'll move to approve the resolution.
Oh,
Or you moved,
Bob moved it.
second.
Thank you.
Kanauer,
Kanauer, aye.
Aken,
Aken, aye.
Daly,
Daly, aye.
McCooey,
McCooey, aye.
Tydings.
Tydings, aye.
All right. Moving into the fourth tabled application, 480, 484 Plank Road, the Malcho's Building Edition. Going through the tabling resolution, there was concern about any spill or remediation information tied to this site. We were able to look closer and just at the history of the site and find that there was a spill record that dated back to 2004, but the DEC records and town records indicate that all of the required remediation was completed in 2006, and there haven't been any other spill records since that time, so we feel that at this time there's no other required remediation based on the town's knowledge and from what the DEC has reported. The one thing that we are following up on is there was also concerns about what prior approvals were tied to the 24/7 operation of the gas station convenience store, and we looked at the 2013 conditional use permit and found that there were certain details of the approval of the conditional use permit. Two in particular, the conditions stated that they would not change the means of ingress and egress, and they wouldn't add any additional lighting. So with those, we're considering that the conditional use permit will need to be either modified or expanded based on the new, or the revised, or with the submission of this site plan. So we are working with the town attorney as well as the ZBA, because this was a conditional use permit issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so we're discussing with the town attorney and the zoning board liaison to figure out if this will go to the zoning board, who originally cited it, or the planning board, now being the board of jurisdiction over this application for preliminary final site plan. And so pending those decisions, or pending more information, we recommend no action at this time, considering we're still waiting for all the materials from the tabling resolution from the last meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, motion to keep tabled.
We can just take no action.
Okay.
Yeah, because
All
it's
right.
the same terms of the last
Okay.
tabling resolution.
Can I make one comment?
Sure.
Can the town provide that remediation history to the applicant?
Yeah, yes.
I think it's important that they're aware of that.
Yes, so that was, it didn't come up on the EAF mapper. And we're thinking that it didn't do that for one or two reasons. One being it was tied to, I believe it was 1640 Empire Boulevard, and when the Malcho station was approved, I believe it was with that approval that they changed the address to the 480 Plank Road. And then also the remediation was completed in 2006. So we're thinking that the EAF mapper just didn't identify it, either because the address wasn't quite right, hoping it's not just that, but it could have just been because the remediation is complete and it wouldn't trigger any additional review because of that. So, but yes, we'll provide that, and the decision on whether or not it goes to ZBA or Planning Board, definitely, we want to have that well understood before we notify the applicant of what their next steps are, because then they'll have certain deadlines for getting to a public hearing before the ZBA or the planning board.
Okay.
So moving into our fifth tabled application, 1801. So the Planning Department prepared a lead agency letter to send out to Ag and Markets, New York State DEC, the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, Monroe County Department of Planning and Development, Monroe County Water Authority, Penfield Town Board, and the Webster Central School District, where the planning board declares its intent to serve as lead agency for this project. And we also have a tabling resolution reflecting the board's intent to serve as lead agency.
Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, I will take a motion to move that.
Second.
Sorry.
Oh.
Again, we want to keep the seeker.
Keep
and
them
table
separate.
resolution
Okay, so
separate.
first we'll declare the planning board as lead agency. And I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Kanauer,
Kanauer, aye.
Aken,
Aken, aye.
Daly,
Daly, aye.
McCooey,
McCooey, aye.
Tydings.
Tydings, aye.
And then the second motion is for the tabling resolution.
Yes, table pending
Yeah.
written responses to the previous
Pending
tabling
responses
resolution.
as described.
Yeah.
And I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you.
Kanauer,
Kanauer, aye.
Aken,
Aken, aye.
Daly,
Daly, aye.
McCooey,
McCooey, aye.
Tydings.
Tydings, aye.
And as Bob mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, just one last new business item. So at the March 12th meeting, we discussed the Bramble Ridge application at 35 Apollonia Lane, and we voted on the chairman to sign the revised plat map, but we also wanted to take action to amend the approval resolution from November 13, 2025. So the approval resolution before you mentions how the applicant submitted a letter and a revised subdivision plan to the board requesting an amendment to the original approval resolution, allowing for the merger of the proposed residential lot 404 and the remaining lands lot 405, changing the approval resolution from 5 lots to 4. There's no change to the number of single-family dwellings on the subdivision. We also mentioned that it complies with all dimensional requirements of the Rural Agricultural 2 zoning district, and the town engineer indicated the preference for the stormwater detention area to be on the residential lot rather than on the remaining lands lot. And so, yeah, we're just looking for the board to vote on approving the amended approval resolution.
All right. Any discussion?
No, I'm just curious, as I know that they were supposed to fix the roads and all the stuff.
Yes.
Where
So,
are we with that?
I guess I don't know. I know that that is it is one of the conditions in the original approval resolution.
Right.
And this approval resolution doesn't modify that.
Okay.
So it is compliance with the approval, the conditions of approval, the seeker findings, and the original approval resolution, and these. Yes, I know that that's something they've been working on, and something that we've been, trying to require them or get them to address in a number of years. But no, I don't have the latest on that, but I can follow up with the board on a condition of that, so.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, with that, I'll move that we make a motion to revise the original approval resolution as noted.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Kanauer,
Kanauer, aye.
Aken,
Aken, aye.
Daly,
Daly, aye.
McCooey,
McCooey, aye.
Tyding.
Tydings, aye.
Okay, anything else before the board?
That was all the business I had for the board this evening.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'll call this meeting adjourned.